Hello everyone, I'm Wesley back again with the new video. OBS was not cooperating the way I wanted it to, but I've decided to improvise and do something new. For those of you who followed me through my All Tomorrow's audiobook, I took your advice and made a pop filter. So, what I'm going to do today is analyze a list that helped me get into music. The 50 most important recordings of the 2000s by NPR. I am going to screen cap and record over that without really much of a script, but this is the format that has been given to me by the hands of fate. I tried recording this twice, but both times my camera broke. So I hope you enjoy regardless of format. Thank you. Enjoy. All right, so to start off the list, we would have the little blurb here. They have a podcast up here. I did listen to it, but I felt it would have been more interesting to hear what they left out rather than what they put in. So, yeah, but they did talk about a lot of their picks and justify it. But to read the blurb at the front, it seemed like an impossible task, but that didn't stop us from trying. With the first decade of the new millennium coming to a close, we decided to compile a list of the 50 most important recordings of the past 10 years. Bear in mind this list is now about 12 years old. It's a list that covers a wide range of styles and genres with indelible songs and albums that challenge, inspire, and captivate. What I'm trying to do basically is see how well these picks hold up and if they really were that important. I think 20 years is good because they say if a car model needs to be 20 years old to be an antique, that's when you can judge it. These are the game changers, or what they thought were the game changers, records that signaled some sort of shift in the way music is made or sounds, or ones that were especially influential or historically significant. Though again, doing it during the decade was probably a bit presumptive. Favorite records don't necessarily qualify. A lot of people, including nearly everyone at NPR Music, love Fleet Fox's debut album, but was it one of the decade's most important? Spoilers, it wasn't. The 50 recordings that appear here are listed alphabetically. We've included artists and bands from a number of musical worlds, from dubstep and hip hop to top 40 pop, classical, jazz world, beardy folk, metal, and hard rock. There's some country too, but admittedly no grindcore or goa trance. Grindcore is bad on purpose. You could probably leave that one off. A lot of people, including All Songs Considered listeners, helped put this list together as we called through the nominees, tears were shed, and arguments were had. But one thing we all agreed on, this was one of the best decades yet for music. We can't wait to hear what comes next. Now, a lot of people know in the 2000s, we spent most of that time just ragging on the new stuff and saying the old stuff was better, but I'm glad they had a sense of optimism. So let's see what they had in store. We're starting off with John Adams on the Transmigration of Souls, and they talk about it as a response to 9/11. I think in terms of 9/11, this belongs here. Good they included classical. When I wrote a response to this list for the 2010s decade, link in the description, we had some trouble. I picked one classical record, but yeah, in terms of modern classical, can't get much more important than this. It won the Pulitzer, and again, 9/11, so it's tied to history. Here we go. Funeral, Arcade Fire, an album that never wore out its welcome. You can say that. It's still played. They still go crazy about it, and they picked Wake Up. This was like the sound of indie rock. It's what we really heard and what put Canada on the map for music. I'm not going to read all these blurbs, but I'm going to highlight some of the interesting ones. Here we go. We have Merriweather Post Pavilion. This album was less than a year old when it made this list, so putting it on was a bit presumptive. It was a gamble, but it paid off. I do still hear people talk about this album. It's still pretty good. The Animal Collective didn't really have much of a follow-up, but this was a landmark. I'll give it that. And I like the cover. It's pretty good. Here we go. These are the Vistas. This is pretty interesting because the 2010s had a lot of jazz. That would be the big comeback for jazz music because you get stuff like Kamasai Washington and King Karul and they're like. But the Bad Plus, they walked so King Karul could run. And it has 3 big covers and it had A lot of rocky influence, but ultimately good pick. I'll take it lightly. Then you get Dangerously in Love. Beyonce, hands down, pretty good. And Beyonce only got better with the 2010s. She'd surge. They go Three Young Women, Port Central Pads, Michelle Williams had Gospel, Kelly Rowland had a hit. Beyonce, well, everyone knows. Of course, there was the relationship with Jay-Z. There was all that. And yeah, she just took over, and it was great. Then you have Forever, Forever Ago by Bon Iver. Skinny Love is a modern standard. And look at this. 2008's For Emma, Forever Ago doesn't seem to age, so it's likely to endure. Yeah, likely. They're thankful it did. But this and other ones seemed kind of presumptive. It was a gamble, but yeah, Bon Iver had the collabs. They won the Grammys. And it's just a really great one, and everyone learns Skinny Love on guitar, so good pick. I'm wide awake this morning. Yeah, I mean, if you want to go that route, I know Bright Eyes is kind of a punch bag. This is kind of a fun album to rag on, but for influence, I'm going to let it go. You can tell I'm not a fan. Untrue. It's funny because on the podcast, actually, to define dubstep, dubstep would, quote unquote, dubstep would have its moments a couple years after this list. But you see Skrillex, that sort of thing, that's electro house. That's not true dubstep. This one has two-step with grime. It's sample heavy. It's a lot of Plunderfist influence. Burial did pay off. He had some good ones. And Untrue, pretty good, pretty niche pick. So good one there. And clap your hands, say yeah. I don't like this one. This one doesn't seem to belong. They talk about it promoting with the internet. They talk about viral marketing. Here they have a visual appeal, but the lead singer's voice grates on me. It's really bad. I think if you wanted to go for the internet, Arctic Monkeys, whatever people say I am, that would have been a better pick. But clap your hands, say yeah, you could skip this one. Up next, we have Breakaway by Kelly Clarkson. They talk about American Idol. They talk about these people who got to be hits from it. They talk about Kelly, who had it. And I think even without American Idol, it's a pretty solid record. It had its moments, that whole pop rock aesthetic, that whole really in-your-face type pop music. That's pretty solid and enough reason to justify it. Since You've Been Gone is a song that didn't hit number one, but history likes to pretend it did. So, yeah, I'll pass it. Rush of Blood to the Head. See, this is a pick I think aged better than they'd had when they put it on here. Look, before it became fashionable to bash Coldplay as a stand-in for all that is stately and milquetoast, they were enormously successful. You see, Coldplay in the 2010s got cool. They had some big hits. They had Adventure of a Lifetime. They just recently had a number one hit with My Universe. So they're more popular now, and Rush of Blood really seems to show off. And they had Keen, Snow Patrol, maybe Muse, but Coldplay was sort of like the standard bearer. Though interesting, they put God Put a Smile on Your Face. Maybe they couldn't get the rights to Clocks. Whatever. Great album. This one's a little weird because it kind of tries to legitimize mashups as an art form. I guess maybe you could. And they talk about the producer and the tiny symbol of hip hop, and it had a litigious record industry. And I think the copyright wars coming through here with the music, that could be grounds to put it on here, but still not sure if it holds up enough in its own right. Danger Mouse was half of Gnarls Barkley, so St. Elsewhere. Come on, St. Elsewhere. Transatlanticism. This is a weird one. It didn't have Death Cab's hits. They talk about the OC 6 Feet Under and the Transatlanticism being played on those teen drama shows. For the record, I don't have a problem with the commercialization of music. To me, that's just a medium through which you are introduced to the song. So nothing wrong with that. But it's not I Will Follow You in the Dark. It doesn't have I Will Possess Your Heart. So this one didn't have the big hits. So putting it on here, kind of weird. Not my choice for Death Cab. Then you have The Crane Wife. This is another album that aged pretty well because the Decemberists had a good 2010s. And they say it could have easily failed. And they had the long, complex stories. And yeah, they do all that. This arguably has their most popular song, The Perfect Crime, #2. So, yeah, I call it. Then Marshall Mathers, nothing to say. Nothing needs to say here. Diamond Seller, Album of the Year nominee, Real Slim Shady, Stand, Without Me. You know it. You know all the songs. No questions. Moving on. Yoshimi battles the Pink Robots. This one's kind of cool because the Flaming Lips had their big creative peak here. They talk about the Soft Bulletin, and they went with the concept album. Concept in quotes, because it's only the 2 title tracks that follow that concept. And then you have Do You Realize with The Life Going Fast. It's a story. It's a pretty neat album. I do recommend it, but kind of on loose grounds, and I don't know if anyone's really talking about it anymore. La Pasión Según San Marcos. This one's weird. They talk about having the contemporary composers, and they're having the classical passions and cross-culture fiesta, beats, tango, and capoeira. Yeah, it's weird. It's an acquired taste. You have to sit down for it. I mean, I guess I see why it's on here, but still kind of odd. And then you get American Idiot. Yeah, you know it. Green Day. Big seller. You know it. Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Jesus of Suburbia. Holiday. Wake Me Up When September Ends. Soundtrack of the decade. You know it. It's not really as political as they like to push, but pop punk, power rock, whatever you want to call it, this is the album. And you get Iron and Wine, Our Endless Numbered Days. He's an artist, painter, filmmaker, and musician who had a lot. He did it all. Wasn't a home recording, but series the same spirits. Guys with beards. I love how that's their big designation. As if you need a beard to do rough folk music, but whatever. It's fine. Again, I'd probably say this or Bon Iver, but I'm not too sad about this. This is pretty good. He's the big white guy with acoustic guitar. You know it. It's good. And you get the Blueprint. Ooh, this is awesome. This is the first song, one of these albums, that's in the National Recording Registry. So that shows its importance. You see, came out on 9/11. He had 2 criminal trials. And it was a soulful sample-based sound with a synth-inductive production. And it was big. It sold well. It's just a good album. Not much to say. And then you get Come Away With Me from Norah Jones. This one's kind of iffy. I kind of hear it as background music, but did go diamond. Norah kind of swept the Grammys. She's pretty cool. Even if she didn't have too many big hits, she did a career for herself. It's decent. I'll take it. And then Fíjate Bien by Juanes. They have this. They talk about the debut album, the Latin Grammy. But the thing is, this doesn't have as big hits. Adiós Te Pido, Mala Gente. Those are from the second album, Un Día Normal. So I think Un Día Normal might belong here more because that was his big breakthrough. That was a good album. And then you have The Sound of Silver. No arguments here. Here we go. Start decade, James Murphy looked like an indie dance version of Pharrell. Okay, elaborate. The more visible, more vocal half of a production duo. Okay. He's splashed by revamping genre tropes with retro sounds. Still a bit of a stretch, but okay. Disco sound, qualities. And then you had Losing My Edge. Great song. And they made everything go for it. And he talked about gatekeepers made obsolete by the onset of the internet age. So he's a bit of a forward thinker. And this one is forward thinking too. They have All My Friends. And they're talking about advancing and about remembering the good times. But yeah, All My Friends, pretty good one. This also has Someone Great and North American Scum. So good record, sort of like a modern Talking Heads. You'll like it. You have the Carter 3. This album had its moments. It wasn't grating, but Amelie, I hate this song so much. They just play it so hard. It goes crazy. I mean, Lil Wayne's voice is so off-putting. He's just such a disgusting person. They talk about his weirdness, but we had other weird rappers. I think Mad Villainy could have been on here, but I guess MF Doom wasn't as popular yet, so they might not have had enough time to think about if Mad Villainy would age well, but I think that's better than the Carter 3. And get the listening. On the other hand, this one did age well. It went for New Playful Celebration. It's like listening to a fictional radio station. It's pretty fun album, actually. It's got some bops. It's got the listening. It might be a more obscure record, but probably could have right on here. Kala, MIA. And this one's kind of iffy. Most of it just goes to Paper Planes, honestly. No album was so far reaching and meaty enough that you could feel its claws. The songs on Cal are catchy, political, clever, and poetic, but mostly just Paper Planes. Pulled the rug out from under the sonic couch surfers. Again, mostly just Paper Planes. So MIA kind of fell off the map. She did have another hit with the franchise, but I'm not sure. Silk Road Journeys by Yo-Yo Ma. This one's interesting. They went with classical. They talk about young people and older classical snobs both. They do that a lot. The generation gap's kind of a thread here. They talk about young people downloading singles, old people buying albums. But honestly, we can have it both ways. I'm glad we can have that. And he talks about having authentic musicians and not classical crossover artists. Are there any classical crossover artists anymore? Maybe Lindsey Sterling, but that's about it. Oh, I love this one. Leviathan. And then Mastodon's rise as Metal's great sword bearer can ascend to be likened to Metallica's ascent. And it's pretty nice, but it had a lot of oceanic death and its lyric. I like they went with an older Mastodon album. They could have gone with Crack the Sky, which released that same year and did age pretty well, but wanted to see if Mastodon would grow, and they did. Probably at the expense of Lateralis, which I also might have put on here, and Systematic Chaos by Dream Theater, also a pretty good one, but I guess Mastodon, sure, they warranted a spot, and to have one band stand for all, you can't go wrong. Brother, Where Art Thou? They talk about this. The soundtrack to Joel and Ethel Cohen's Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Was an unlikely hit, wasn't terribly popular with audience or critics. At first, they warmed up to it as time went on, but they didn't have any of the hit songs here on the radio. They reworked standards. They made some new stuff. I love how that one guy did his own singing for In the Jailhouse Now. It won multiple Grammys, including Album of the Year at the Renaissance and Americana. Yeah. This one's good. I like this one. Pretty good. Good example of the soundtrack carrying the movie. And then you get Black Stars by Jason Moran, another jazz album. They have the reworkings of classical. They have Jason Moran doing his own instrumentations. They have him reworking it. This would kind of be the standard for jazz moving forward, and it's a good album also. I'll take it. And then, Stankonia. I love Stankonia. It's my favorite rap album. They have Miss Jackson as the #1 hit from here, but B.O.B., man. Come on, B.O.B. It's thoughtful, it's catchy, it's amazing. Andre spits straight fire. And they include this and not Love Below, because Love Below won the Album of the Year, but we had a whole bunch of bangers from this one. It's a monumental achievement, both confessional and production. Pretty good. Then you get Brad Paisley. I heard this album. It's alright. You talk a lot about country, but this is polished. It's the Nashville sound. They go with the bass pop country and the roughed up roots. I think Brad Paisley hits the middle ground. He sings Ticks. He sings songs about his truck, about his dog. He sings I'm a Man, which isn't necessarily about toxic masculinity, but about the joys of being a man. So, yeah, we can let that slide. Person Pitch. This one was a gamble. In the same way that hip-hop introduced the sample as a means to beat or hook, Panda Bear's Person Pitch makes listeners rethink as an expensive songwriting tool. This could well be the future of music. It kind of was, and it kind of wasn't. It was kind of an iffy gamble, but I think Panda Bear got a little overshadowed. This album is still good, but I don't think it was the big revolution. Here we go. Robert Plant, Alison Krauss. My dad owned this album. It's a pretty interesting, unique album. They have T-Bone Burnett from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And it works. It makes some good sounds. Please Read the Letter. Pretty good song. This won record and album of the year, so no complaints. Oh, Give Up. Give Up. The Postal Service. They talked about the idea of electropop and collaborations. You might know this. They picked District Sleeps Alone Tonight, but you might know Such Great Heights off this. That's the UPS whiteboard song, if you don't know. But they have Ben and Jimmy got together. They wrote and recorded, sent the tracks through the mail, and added vocal parts. Hence the name, the Postal Service. It's long distance. And they did some pretty good. It was pretty nice follow-up. But again, I'd probably say either this or Death Cab, not both. Speaking of both, we have the only artist to appear twice, Radiohead. I think it was they couldn't choose between In Rainbows or Kid A. In Rainbows predicted Bandcamp. It had that whole pay what you want gimmick, and it was also a good album because it had these technical achievements. It got Nude, the lead-off track, to number 37. That's pretty incredible. And it gave some density to the music. Kid A famously leaked online. It has all this electronica and this moody thing, the national anthem. That's quite the trip. Given the choice between the two, I'd pick In Rainbows, but Kid A is pretty awesome, and these two albums are generally why I cite the 2000s as a better decade for music than the 90s, but I know it's an acquired taste. Fijación Oral, not the Shakira I would have gone with. They had Laundry Service, of course, that has the big hit, Whenever, Wherever. But then you have Fijación Oral, which they misspell in the description. I mean, yeah, Spanish videos, heavy rotation, language barrier coming down, but still not really what I would have chosen to represent Shakira. She had bigger hits, and I mean, she does belong, but probably not with this. Oh, Garden State, terrible movie. Zach Braff trying to be all pretentious and broody and having this whole mood shift style thing. It's such a dull movie, but the soundtrack is pretty good. They do have blurring the lines between indie music and mainstream. It had Nick Drake, Simon Garfunkel, Coldplay, The Shins, Iron and Wine. It's pretty nice and pretty well arranged hearing them all together. It paints a good picture. Just listen to the soundtrack and avoid the movie. They go with New Slang as the big one. That's where Natalie Portman gives him the headphones. It's a decent song, but the movie's garbage. And then you have the officially untitled Cigarros. This one's pretty interesting because the 90s had post-rock, the 2010s had post-rock, not so much the 2000s. It was just Cigarros, and that's it. And they're an Icelandic band playing slow instrumental music and singing Hopelandic. That's a constructed language. But none of the songs have titles. It's basically just lo-fi beats to study and listen to. That's their brand of post-rock. Pretty interesting, and I'm glad they put it in because it's really the only post-rock album of note for this decade. So, yeah, good. And then you have In the Zone. This is another pick that aged well with the whole Free Britney thing, giving people a reevaluation. She made some darn good pop. Toxic is a banger. I love Toxic. But otherwise, we have the lineup of producers: Bloodshy, R. Kelly, Tricky, Moby. Surprisingly, they don't list Timbaland. I don't know if she did something like that, but it's still pretty awesome. It's pretty catchy. You can hear this in the clubs. It's awesome. Illinois, Chicago. This is a pick that's gone pretty good. I mean, Illinois still holds up. You have Sufjan Stevens as this weird, crazy personality. He did a lot of his homework. He wrote a lot of journalism. He canceled the project after Illinois to make all 50 states. I wish he got into Virginia. But Illinois, pretty nice, pretty fine album. It goes through its highs, its lows. It's a good listen. Chicago's a pretty great track too. If nothing else, just listen to that. Isn't this it? The Strokes faced long odds when the band debut came out. They were pretty baller. They had to stand out, but they gave these really catchy hits, and they gave us Last Night. They say in 20 years, when children ask their parents what music they listen to, many will reach this record first. I think some have, because it's 20 years old right now. So pretty solid, pretty good pick. I still hear Stroke stuff on the radio, so yes, it's once. This is a decent movie. I saw it. Glenn Hanser's band The Frames made a bunch of tremendous records in the aughts, and they had him do Once. These two are not actors. They are professional musicians, and having them collab and have them develop, pretty sweet actually, and I liked it. Falling Slowly won the Oscar. It's been made to a Broadway musical, so I think this worked. In the Heart of the Moon. This is a very particular one. It's world music. I wish I'd had more in my response list, but as it stands here, I'm not sure what to make of it. Yeah, they have Torre, Alafarca Torre, who died, so maybe. I just found this a pretty decent instrumental album. Don't know if I'd put it as one of the big ones. Return to Cookie Mountain. They start with I Was a Lover. It's a pretty moving, pretty banging track. You might know Wolf Like Me from Guitar Hero, and it has a lot of the personal pain and anguish, but it's a pretty rockin' record. I do like all of these records, and this is another gamble that paid off because TV on the radio would have some success through the 2010s, so I'm calling this one a win. College Dropout. They had him do this, and they had him reinvent himself as an actual rapper. He's a much better producer than rapper, I thought. They have Insecurity's Religion and his Near Fatal Crash. It's kind of funny because this was his debut as a rapper, so we almost didn't get a whole bunch of Kanye. I'm not sure what that would have been. That would have been terrible. But they have a revealing approach. They keep the message going. Jesus Walks, pretty great song. That's pretty nice. I'm going to call it here because Kanye would, of course, surge throughout the rest of the decade. But yeah, College Dropout was where it began. So yeah, we'll give it that. Then you get White Blood Cells. They were debating whether this or Elephant. Elephant, as a result, is the only album in the Acclaim Music Top 10 to miss this list. But let's read on. Jack White has fused Detroit garage rock with Zeppelin bombast for country bluegrass with Loretta Lynn and Ricky Skaggs. Vanley Rose, that would have been an interesting one to see on this list. I would have liked that. But White Blood Cells had the Flawless Slice of Fuzzed Out Frenetic Hip Shaking. Then they have Fell in Love with a Girl, the Lego video. It's just simplicity defined. It's just so minimalist, but so good. It captures your spirit. I do prefer Elephant, if only because that had the heavier rockin' songs, but White Blood Cells feels more like an actual debut than their debut, so I'll give it that. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. This is an interesting one. Wilco had to come up with it. They had to put it online against the wishes of their label, and they had the experimental cryptic stuff, and they were pushing with folk and electronic. Wilco got bigger after this album, but it had to do where it all began, and I do think YHF is the best of their output for the 2000s. I like all their stuff, and this was just where it started. Back to Black, last but not least. It was hard listening to podcasts because this was when Amy was still alive. They talked about how she was killing herself. She was getting the Best New Artist Grammy, which was The Kiss of Death. It was very hard to listen to. Back to Black is a pretty good record for this, and it shows just how much great music we lost and we could have had. And it was just such a beautiful record to come from someone who was 23. They talk about Mark Ronson, who had the big influence and the big pushing. Uptown Funk wasn't out yet, but Mark Ronson would become the big producer with it, as would the Dap Kings. But yeah, it's just really sad and just really a good reason to put this on here. But that's the whole list. I found some omissions like the aforementioned Arctic Monkeys and Songs for the Deaf and some of Johnny Cash's later recordings, but otherwise pretty decent list, and I think most of the picks hold up. So let me tell you what you think should have been on here or what shouldn't have been on here. I made a response list for this in the 2010s, which I'll link in the description, and I'll also link you my own album that I made just this year. Hope you enjoy and see you soon. Bye.